But hopefully we're going to make it all the way through. That's the goal. The goal is to make it all the way through. Nonetheless, I'm super excited to talk on this topic on emotional intelligence. And I feel like if it's one thing that the church could grow in and develop in, it is emotional intelligence. And so the fact that you are here today is a very big positive. I was praying like, Lord, please let a good group show up so we can talk on this topic and start the conversation on emotional intelligence. And the stuff that we're going to talk about today throughout the next couple probably minutes, hours, however long, is going to be a very small, like dipping your foot in, right? Like we're not going to go in depth and dissect and get all intense, but it's going to be a very good place to start on the topic of emotional intelligence. If you've ever heard about EQ, IQ, all this different stuff, EQ is in reference to emotional intelligence. And so we're going to dive in and see, how the Lord continues to take this conversation and grow us as leaders in all the different spaces and areas that we are called to minister in. We're called to walk in. And I want to start off by sharing a little bit of like a story to describe just the energy. And if you read the book Changing the Story, you might have seen this clip before in that story, in that book. But there was one day in particular, my wife and I was getting ready for work in the morning. For work. No, we were getting ready for church. Felt like work. It felt chaotic for a second. Anyways, nonetheless, we're getting ready for church in the morning. A lot of different things is happening. A lot of things are moving. She hops in the shower, and I think to myself, I'm going to make us breakfast so that we have some food ready. Just heading out the door, just trying to set the mood right. Made some breakfast pancakes, her favorite. And as she is coming out the shower and getting ready and kind of moving into the kitchen, I'm now moving to the bedroom because I got to get ready too, right? And so as I'm making that transition into the bedroom and she's making that transition into the kitchen, she's excited, seafood there, right? Like, yay, happy wife, happy life. I was experiencing it, right? But I was getting ready to, hop in the shower and get some things moving on my end. And she comes up to me and she's all like, are you coming to eat or what? Right? She had the little attitude. So for me, that triggered me because I was like, you're not going to hit me with that. So I come back and I'm like, yo, babe, and I turned it into a whole thing, into a whole problem. Sabbath morning. That's how we started the day. Right. But it's interesting because it dawned on me in that moment that I realized like, yo, I was out of pocket. Right. Like I allowed my emotions to come up to a certain level and I retaliated in a way instead of responding. And so when we're talking about emotional intelligence, the reason why it's so beautiful is because emotional intelligence helps us not to react to situations, but it teaches us how to respond to situations. And I came to realize just talking with my wife and sitting down and coming to the point where, okay, emotions, relax. Conversation, let's have it. I came to realize that morning she was dealing with some stuff. And if I would have been able to have better emotional intelligence in that situation, I would have been able to better navigate, okay, what's really going on here? How can we really have a conversation and what can really take place? And so we've been talking in the sermon series about being triggered and having trigger moments and all these different things. And so this conversation is really going to help us to handle, okay, what do we do when we get triggered? How do we handle that? How is it when we talk to other people, when we converse with other people, when they get triggered? And so first we want to just go over what is emotional intelligence. And so if you have the sheet, the paper right here, got a little bit of a definition. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions as well as, right? So it's not just that, as well as recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. And so it has something to do with ourselves, managing ourselves, and having an influence and recognizing the emotions of others. It involves being aware of our feelings and the feelings of those around us and using this awareness to guide our thinking, right? So we're using this awareness to guide our thinking, and we're using this awareness to guide our behavior. Emotional awareness is one of the things that's really important to document, to understand, to be aware of. And emotional awareness is simply recognizing and understanding our own emotions as well as the emotions of others, demonstrating empathy towards others and ourselves. So one of the very first things when it comes to emotional intelligence is we have to be aware of what emotions we even have. We have to be aware of the emotions that are even out there. We have to be aware of what's happening on the inside of us. And what's so beautiful about this, and some people may feel nervous or intimidated or scared, right? To explore an emotion, to explore, okay, what's going on the inside of me. It may seem nervous or maybe even scary because we think to ourselves, well, if I find an emotion that's bad or that's poor or that can cause, damage or something, if I find this emotion, well, then maybe that means that I am this way, right? And we can identify with our emotions. But the thing isn't to identify with our emotions. The Bible teaches us we identify with Christ. And I believe it's actually Christ that gives us the strength to face our emotions. He gives us the strength and confidence to look on the inside and say, what is in here? If we don't take time to take inventory on what's on the inside of us, then the truth of the matter is our emotions can still influence our thinking and our behavior, whether we take notice of it or not. And so it's better to take notice of it and really learn how do I surrender this to Christ? How do I grow from this? How do I lead from this? How do I influence other people around me with this? Rather than say, it's bad. And I have this image. I saw this gentleman who was having a meal with the granddaughter, and during this meal, this father figure, right, was telling his child, hey, be happy. Be happy. Happy is an emotion, right? Like, and the father said, be happy. Like this child can be like, I am now happy. Thank you, Father, for bringing me out of that sadness, that anger, that despair. You did it, Dad. Thank you. As much as we wish that could happen, right? We actually don't and kind of unable to control our emotion. Now, can we control behavior? Yeah, we can talk about behavior and navigate that conversation. But when it comes to our emotions and what we feel in a moment, I can't in a moment be like, I'm going to just muster up jealousy right now. I'm just going to feeling it. Like, no, you don't. That's not how it works. You don't just muster that up. You can't muster up an emotion. And that's where we kind of get into this thing of like, okay, if we can't control the emotion that comes up, then what good is it to just ignore them or not identify them? Like if they're there, like we can't identify with something that's like this way, that way. No, it's I'm me, but my body feels certain things. So one of the things is emotional awareness, being aware of our emotions. The more in tune we are with our emotions and what we can feel, the more in tune we're going to be with the possibilities of what other people feel too. Because now I'm realizing, I know I feel jealous. I know I feel anger. I know I feel bitter. I know that I feel, all these different types of emotions. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I know I can feel all these things. I can better now understand what somebody else might be feeling or going through or experiencing. Because we may not all be able to resonate with an experience. Okay, let me just do this for a quick example. How many of you guys know what it's like to get kicked out of a boarding school? Anybody? I was kicked out of a boarding school. Nobody knows what it's like. I'm the only one. Kinda, right? Maybe a little bit. You feel it a little bit. Okay, how about this? How many of you guys know what it's like to feel disconnected from someone? How many of you guys know what it's like to feel like you don't belong? How many of you guys know what it feels like to be the bad guy in a situation? You're like, man, everybody's pointing at me. Well, I felt all of those things. Now, some may be like, you shouldn't have felt like the bad guy. You're the one that did whatever to get kicked out. But I still felt like the bad guy because they didn't allow me to go back. So I still felt like the bad guy, even though, I might have done something bad. Yeah, I was the bad guy. But like to identify with that, that's real. To identify like I am a bad person. That's intense. So we may not all have the same experience, but we all have similar emotions. And so if I understand how I feel in certain situations, then it better helps me to understand how people may feel in certain situations. So emotional awareness is very important. The ability to harness emotions, being able to utilize emotions constructively, both in ourselves and in our interactions with others. This is a beautiful thing to keep in mind. Emotions, again, we going over this, emotions are not bad of themselves. Emotions are not bad of themselves. It's where our emotions drive us to. Right? This is to give you an example. Growing up, I was a very angry child. Like I would throw temper tantrums. You ask my sister any stories about when Samson had anger problems, and you'll hear about me punching walls, throwing glass on the floor, just like angry, right? And so at some point, a change happened where I kind of like felt like anger was an icky emotion, and I felt like it was bad. And so I kind of distanced myself from anger, and I was like, okay, anger, you be over there, and I'm gonna be over here, and I'm just gonna make jokes and laugh with people. And so I kind of entered into this comedy space, this comic space where I'd make fun of certain things, and that's how I expressed myself. And I felt like anger was one of those things that's like, nah, it's over there. We're just gonna leave that over there. Until I eventually sat down and started having this conversation with a professional counselor, and she began to ask me questions like, why do you feel like anger is bad? And I just like, I don't know, it's bad. Like you just, destructive, right? And then she started kind of explaining, well, couldn't it be constructive? Like, couldn't you build something with anger instead of destroying something with anger? And I'm like, what does that mean? You know, it started intriguing me. Like, what do you mean by build something with anger? And then she started talking about people who, in anger, constructively found a path and the way she explained it was anger, frustration, are kind of in the same. Have you ever been frustrated before? It's like, yeah, anger and frustration are similar emotions. They're cousins, they're brothers, right? They're family. They're part of each other. And so part of that anger, part of that frustration, part of that, and she was naming other emotions, right? All these emotions that fit around anger. And I came to realize that, wait, instead of ignoring the anger that I felt, which at times allowed people to step over my boundaries and me to be like, make a joke out of it instead of being intentional in addressing it. Instead of dismissing myself from anger, I had to learn how to actually express like, hey, I'm actually frustrated with this. Like this actually makes me angry that you're stepping over this boundary. And it actually moves us to building the relationship rather than destroying it through resentment and other things that could come as a result because I don't want to touch anger. And because I don't want to touch anger, it allows all these other things to happen. So we want to take the emotion that we're experiencing and we want that emotion to drive us to a place that is very constructive, that's building. Like even when people talk about Jesus, when he turned over the tables in the temple, we like bringing that up to be like, see, I can be angry when I need to be. When the Holy Spirit descends upon me, I can get mad, right? But when you really look at the whole story of Jesus turning tables in the temple, that whole scene wasn't for Jesus to just display his anger. It was actually to create space for people to come in and get healing. It was actually to create space for, like when you continue reading what happens right after he turns these tables and creates space, people actually storm in for the opportunity to get healed, for an opportunity to connect with God. He declares his house as a house of prayer, a place to connect with God. And so even the anger that Jesus displayed wasn't necessarily anger for himself to be like, yo, I'm mad right now, check it out. Like, no, it was actually an opportunity to create space for people to come in. When you look at different civil rights movements and things that have taken place over the course of the last 50 years, like a lot of these things were people who were frustrated, people who were angry, who try to find these constructive ways to actually build something that's intentional, true, and in the end we look back and we say, wow, that's amazing. And those emotions drove it. So the ability to harness, I can get caught up in some of these so we can keep moving. But the next one is ability to manage emotions. So effectively regulating and controlling our emotions, including calming ourselves down and cheering others up when needed. And so sometimes there may be times, and I don't know if you've ever been in situations like this, but there may be times where we need to manage our emotions to say like, okay, I feel this right now, but right now is not the time and place to like have this conversation or to navigate this whole emotion that I'm feeling. And so since right now is not the time, I need to learn how to set this motion aside, which is, we talk about humility and we talk about serving one another. Like this is about to be the conversation to do it. But the ability to take that emotion and set it aside for a moment in order to facilitate a conversation that is more beneficial and cheery. One of the places that you see this the most, and this is just kind of like a quick example, one of the places you see this the most is when you see maybe somebody do some type of performance. Maybe they acted in a play, maybe they sang a song, maybe even preaching a sermon, right? And so after these moments, what happens is we have these thoughts and feelings that pop up in our head. And we're like, you know what? I'm going to go up there and tell them everything that they did wrong because they need to improve and get better, right? That's what may pop up. It's like, but in a moment like that, part of emotional intelligence is realizing that this person is in a sensitive space right now, and having this conversation with this person is probably not going to be beneficial to their development. And there's actually some studies done where one of the biggest reasons kids quit sports is not what happens on the field, but it's what happens on the ride home. And so it's what happens on the ride home that actually influences and impacts kids to saying, I quit, I don't want to do this anymore. But it's because of not being able to have the emotional intelligence to realize and manage the emotions that, you know, the parent has, the aunt, uncle has, and having that constructive criticism conversation, whatever you want to call it, right, with the kid, and waiting to have that conversation. So it's important to manage our own emotions so that we can better meet the needs of others and even ourselves, because there's times for even ourselves where it's like, okay, this is too much. I do need to take a break from this, and this is not the time to dive in and try to figure out what's going on in my life, but I need a moment to I'm gonna come back to this at a time where I'm ready to have this conversation or to dive into this experience or memory. Then the last one, differentiating between emotions. Understanding that emotions are not inherently good or bad, and learning to appreciate and accept them rather than suppressing them or denying them. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 and 4, it says, there's a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens, time to weep, time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. And I love that as a little bit of a picture, because sometimes what happens is we can feel like an emotion is bad. And when we feel or sense that an emotion is bad, we can suppress that emotion. But the thing is, the more that we try to avoid an emotion, the more we try to suppress an emotion, the more we actually find ourselves running into that emotion. And when we run into that emotion, it's not pretty. Right? Because we're constantly feeling, I shouldn't feel depressed right now. I shouldn't feel anxious right now. I shouldn't feel angry right now. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't. And we tell ourselves this over and over again. And it's almost like intensifying the feeling that we have. It's almost like we try to tell ourselves, man, I need to stop thinking about like a pink elephant. Whatever I do, I got to stop thinking of anything but a pink elephant. Anything but a pink elephant with large ears that are just flapping, and the elephant's flapping really hard, starts to fly. Anything besides that. Like, try to think of something other than a pink elephant. Can I pink elephant? No. Gray elephant? Maybe. Pink? No. No pink elephant, especially pink. Especially spelled pink, like on the side of the elephant. Like, especially if it's spelled pink, that's worse, because I see the spelling, And so, like, we say this. It's like you can say that all day, but you're going to be thinking about that pink elephant. Instead of allowing that pink elephant to show up. And it showed up. And the pink elephant came. And by the end of this, it'll probably leave. If you're still thinking about a pink elephant at the end, let me know. We'll talk. No, I'm joking. You probably won't be thinking about a pink elephant. Anyways, but besides the point, I'm just trying to get us to realize that when we focus on an emotion is bad or this is bad, then we start to feel bad if we think that or feel that. In reality, we're supposed to allow the emotions to flow, and our behaviors and our thinking process has to remain faithful. We're supposed to allow these emotions to come as they come. They gonna come. But our behaviors and our thinking is what remains faithful. And so I'll be like, I can feel this way, and even differentiating and knowing exactly what you're feeling. Like, okay, I'm feeling... And we're going to talk about that in a minute, like how do you differentiate, what do you go to, what do you think about that? But to be able to slow down and recognize, okay, these are all the things I'm feeling. Cool. I'm feeling them. what next, right? Like, and that's what some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about as we move forward. But I just wanted to give you kind of like this landscape view of, okay, this is what we're looking at when we're talking about emotional intelligence, and more say, like, even when we get triggered, okay, how do we handle that? How do we navigate that? But one of the first things that I want us to do as an activity, and I want us to do this maybe in groups of as low as 2, as high as 4 or 5. I mean, feel free to have some fun with it. But what I want us to do is, if you have your phone on you, or maybe you have like 2 people in a group that have, I was trying to print it for y'all, my bad, it's just hectic. Anyways, but I want you to go to Google and I want you to search up what they call an emotional wheel. Some of y'all have probably seen these before. Maybe you've interacted with one before, but if you haven't, this thing is going to be beauty for you, because what this is going to do is it's going to break down all the different types of emotions underneath certain brackets. And I just want you to talk about some of these emotions for the next like 10-ish minutes and ask yourself the question, like, yo, what emotions stand out? What emotions did you not know was correlated with which emotion? And you just got to check out the emotional wheel. Just find one. It ain't got to be super complex, but if you want to do a complex one, those are cool too. But find an emotional wheel and just start looking through all the different emotions that are on that wheel and talk about it amongst the group. What stands out, what sticks out, what you think is cool, and then we come back and we're going to talk about it. That's it. She going to help you. She got you. Teamwork make the dream work.